2023 season has come to an end following a 21-20 loss to the Seahawks. Arizona finishes with a 4-13 record. We're going to break down the season finale and the season as a whole right here on Morning Scramble, presented by Verizon from the SeatGeek studios. Alongside Jody Jackson and Zach Gershman, I'm Dani Sureck. Final play of the game, a Cardinals wide right 51-yard field goal. You win and lose on more than one play. Offensively, a slow start for the Cardinals, getting stalled in the red zone with incomplete passes, missed blocks, and penalties. However, in the second half, turned it around and kept themselves in the game, making it a close one. Jody, week after week, we continue to see this Cardinals team refuses to go down without a fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. And you wouldn't, of course, Matt Prater, who's one of the best kickers of all time, you would not expect that. But to me, this game was really not about the W or the L. It was about, again, proving what Dani mentioned, the fight of this team. The offense, again, piling up 466 yards. Last week we talked about how amazing it was that they ran 72 plays. They ran 69 plays in this game. And further cemented to me, guys, just this defense has a lot of holes, particularly on the defensive line. When you look at what Jonathan Gannon was asked about, I think we all were wondering, and we know it's pick your poison a lot. So if people are running free on the back end, it's probably because the quarterback is extending plays. If they can hem in quarterbacks next year, which you'd think would be, I'm not saying an easy fix, but you can find personnel to do that. How much better is this team on defense? But offensively, again, proving, Zach, that a lot of the pieces are here. Mm-hmm. I mean, you add a couple more and maybe this offense becomes elite.
The offense has the potential to do that. And I think as a whole, the word potential is something that could really be used to describe this team. Because from the top down, it's on full display. And the defensive side of the ball, there was that Tyler Lockett big-time play and then the two-point conversion as well that ultimately gave the Seahawks the lead. That was blown coverage. And a lot of those times when it was asked to Jonathan Gannon post-game, he said, play extension. That's what hurt you against the Chicago Bears. That's what you tried to limit against the Philadelphia Eagles, and your offense was able to pull through against the Philadelphia Eagles, but Jalen Hurts still hurts you in a lot of different ways through play extension. That's something that as the offseason now begins and the offseason progresses, that's going to be an area of emphasis that they're going to be looking at. The pieces they're going to have to fill all throughout the season, all throughout the offseason, and throughout the roster on both sides of the ball. But in general, that play extension and trying to develop that pass rush is something that's going to be key going into week one, wherever that might be.
Usually potential when talked about teams around the league, you don't want to hold on to potential. You want to talk about the now. With the Cardinals, that's not the case when you're talking about the potential and the hope and what we've seen from this team, really with this offense. Since quarterback Kyler Murray made his return, finished playing 8 games this season. Against the Seahawks on Sunday, Murray finished 22 of 30, a season best, 262 passing yards and a touchdown. Murray was under center 30 times, by far the most in a game this season. Jody, what stood out about Murray's performance Sunday?
Well, I think first of all, not only Sunday, but just as we've progressed, being under center has been huge for this offense. And I think last year and in previous years, we heard rumblings. No one really ever asked him straight up. I don't think that I remember. Kyler Murray maybe didn't want to do it. That's clearly not the case. Mm-hmm. He talked about asking for it. And so Drew Petzing and really throughout the years, if you watch the NFL and you watch offenses that function, you have to have that deception. You have to have that threat of the run. This team absolutely has the threat of the run, but when it gets to Kyler, Dani, on Sunday, what you saw was, again, very efficient, 22 of 30, 260 yards through the air, 33 yards rushing. That was the one that really got me. I mean, you saw him take off, kind of find a seam down the left side. It told me a lot because, first of all, we know how aware Kyler Murray is of the defense around him and potential danger around him. But flying through, potential harm's way there and just outrunning guys. Again, Kyler Murray has that freak ability. When you're that fast, it's always fun for me to hear his teammates talk about, well, yeah, when your quarterback runs a 4.3, and that unique ability adds another dimension, and I think is one of the many reasons why this coaching staff is so excited about next year and what Kyler can continue to do. learning the offense, working with these guys. I mean, sure, it wasn't perfect on Sunday, but this is a game that, clearly they should have won, and it wasn't on the offense, that's for sure.
Going on the 33-yard run, I believe you tweeted saying that he just looks like he's jogging.
I did. It's so casual when Murray has the ball and he's running just in his hand. He is so fast, and it looks the same as if one of us were just casually jogging. It seems so easy for him.
It's ridiculous, and that speed is something that Michael Wilson was just talking about in the locker room, saying like, oh man, K1's got that. And you're able to see, and everyone, that's caught a lot of people by surprise. I mean, we talk about the way that he's thrown the football, and Tristan Colon telling DJ Humphries in the beginning half of the season, like, does it always look like that? And yeah, that's the Kyler Murray of old, and that's the Kyler Murray of present day as well. His leadership has developed as well all throughout the locker room, that trust that he has with his receivers. And it's unfortunate that it's starting to click towards the latter half of the season when you're already out of playoff contention, and all you're playing for really is pride and to win games. But at the end of the day, I think that somebody asked K1 afterwards, do you like playing under center? And he said directly, I do. And you're able to see that in his play. The play action game has completely changed because Kyler Murray has that threat of running the ball and able to scramble for the 33 yards like he did. And it's also he hides the ball really well, largely in part because of his size. He is a lot smaller than most other quarterbacks, as has been very highly documented. But that element of the offense is certainly one that you hope to develop as the offseason and then the regular season moves on.
Using it to his advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Murray's touchdown pass, an 8-yarder to tight end Trey McBride, was a beauty of a flea flicker. Cardinals, it's 4th and 3 from Seattle's 8. They bring out their kicker and their punter. However, they quickly go to the left side, and it's Kyler Murray and then Seattle's defense. It wasn't even their defense. It was their kick coverage unit, right? Their special teams unit. And then Cardinals are able to pull it off quickly. He finds Trey McBride. And I like that post-game Kyler was saying that, oh yeah, special teams coordinator Jeff Rodgers has had that for the 5 years I've been here with him. He's been wanting to bring up that play.
And Jeff Rodgers has told us he has hundreds of trick plays. I believe it now. Now I can see it.
I actually believe it could be hundreds.
Now I can see it, especially because he said he's been trying to get that all throughout his 5 years, trying to execute that play, and just so happened to have it in the bag of tricks on the last game of the season. I mean, what a way to close out the year with a play like that. And I think for the Seattle side, they did not see Kyler Murray jog fully off the field. He stayed right by the numbers, and that's what allowed K1 to run right back out. So the switch was already made. Seattle brought their unit out. The Cardinals brought their unit out. It just so happened to be that Matt Prater and Blake Gillikin are your wide receiver 1 and 2 there.
Yeah, and there's a reason Jeff Rodgers has been here for so long and doing such a great job in the special teams area for the Cardinals. And so you love to see him pull. I'm sure there are. When you say hundreds, I mean, there's no question, but you don't always run that stuff. And I love it. I mean, I remember as a little kid when Dan Marino was playing, the clock play. And so, you never know what you're going to see. I feel like in the NFL, a lot of that has kind of gone away. But what was interesting, though, there was a defender in the area, but it was a good throw that only Trey McBride could get to. So the execution was pretty good. That's the thing with the trick plays is, let's face it, you practice it. But I think coaches always kind of are holding their breath because the execution can be difficult, not only just on your own side, but just what if there's something wacky that you don't. Yeah, and you might not expect something. I think there was a play last year or within the last couple of years where they actually, not that the other team expected it, but there was something wacky that happened that kind of threw a wrinkle into it. So it is a little risky.
If it works, you're a genius. If it doesn't, it's what are you doing? But the best part about the entire play is Trey McBride wasn't even the intended receiver initially. It was supposed to be Greg Dortch, who ended up slipping, or he ended up getting tripped one way or another. But Kyler Murray threw the ball to a place that only Trey McBride was able to get it all the way in the back of the end zone. Not much room to make a play, but Trey McBride, we've talked about his progression all year long. To cap it off with the touchdown and the way that he did right there, I think is indicative of what this 2023 season was like for Trey McBride.
We saw a little trickery Sunday and a whole lot of wide receiver Michael Wilson, who only had 4 catches in the previous 3 games combined, finished Sunday's game with 95 receiving yards on 6 receptions. You got a good look at the potential between the rookie receiver and his franchise quarterback. That chemistry has been an issue this year, Zach. You really got a good look at what those two can be together with a full offseason.
And when I spoke to Michael Wilson after the game in Philadelphia, he said, watch the tape. It's not that the wide receiver's fault. It's not Kyler's fault. It's time. And you understand that. And I think the fact that we've seen it in this 8-game sample, it took 6 games, which technically is about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And that's a preseason, a training camp, all stuff that Kyler Murray did not have. He had to do it in the thick of the season. And the fact that he was able to do it and start to have this progression, you do have a glimpse into the future of what that's like, especially with a rookie wide receiver like Michael Wilson. This was only his first year, and he missed a handful of games. He is just scratching the surface as to what he could potentially be for this Arizona Cardinals offense.
Remember after the Bears game how sad it was? We were all bemoaning there's no wide receiver option here. It's not working, and look at what Michael Wilson and, Greg Dortch obviously had a big play in that game, but Michael Wilson performing well has just changed the entire outlook for the wide receiver room, really. And you know that this team's going to add in the offseason, whether it is bringing back Hollywood Brown, but they have a lot of options, certainly in the draft and in free agency, and they're going to upgrade that room. But yeah, Michael Wilson being healthy, getting that time with Kyler Murray. Yeah, he had a pretty good game in San Francisco on October 1, where he had 7 catches for 76 yards. But then the injury came and a new quarterback with Kyler and getting on the same page. And so, Dani, things look extremely bright now that you can see what Michael Wilson can do.
Time with those two will be key moving forward. What is impressive to me about Wilson's performance is Kyler Murray and the leadership we've seen from this franchise quarterback. When Kyler threw the pick six, it was intended for Michael Wilson last week, and it was Wilson who was the last to almost catch that player outside the end zone. And it was Kyler who went up to Wilson and talking to him on the sideline, telling him to keep his head up and stay in the game. And Kyler continued to find Wilson and ended up having that touchdown in the 2-point conversion. Similar this week of Wilson talking post-game that the trust that Kyler has given him has helped with that confidence, and Kyler continuing to go to Wilson even if they haven't been on the same page to start the game.
Michael Wilson said post-game that he texted Kyler Murray after that game in Philadelphia and said, "Thank you for trusting me and for giving me another chance." And I'm not sure, I don't know how many other players in the league would have that sense of character to do something like that, to text your quarterback and say, "Thank you for trusting me." But to see how it's involved. And in this game against the Seattle Seahawks, there was one play, and it might not have gone for the most amount of yards. It was just a general improv play where Kyler Murray was scrambling outside the pocket, and he pointed to Michael Wilson, and Michael Wilson had that toe drag reception right on the sidelines for the first down. It was just a standard first down, nothing too crazy about it, but just seeing their on-field chemistry develop, you could only imagine what happens when they do have some time in the offseason to link up and start to throw a little bit together and really start to develop that chemistry to gel. Michael Wilson said in the locker room during locker room cleanout that I was just a rookie. We didn't really have that relationship with one another. But as the season has gone on, as Kyler Murray he's always been around the facility. I mean, he said yesterday that he's going to be working out today, so I'm sure we'll see him walking around. But to see how it's developed, it's definitely an encouraging sign for what the future of the Arizona Cardinals could be.
Well, and it is too, because the involvement of the quarterback is always a big deal. I mean, Kyler Murray, when he came in, I think he was a little more quiet. He was a little more of an introvert. And you see him now talking to these guys much more, being that leader, taking the reins, and he's got the coaching staff that really supports him. He's talked a lot about Izzy Wilfork, his quarterback coach, of course, Drew Petzing running the offense. I mean, it's very cohesive. You don't see a 4-13 team that talks about the season the way that the guys did yesterday, both in the press conferences and in the locker room, unless it's cohesive, and that's great to see. So I think, again, when your quarterback is helping direct things with the wide receivers, being able to answer their questions, being able to, again, that was great that Michael Wilson took the initiative to text him and keep that line open of like, hey, you didn't go away from me after that mistake that caused a 99-yard interception, because we all know, immediately, not everybody sees those plays, and that stat goes on the quarterback line for the pick. But, it is impressive, I think, what Kyler's done as a leader, and that's going to help everyone around him, running backs, O-line, wide receivers, the entire offense.
Sunday's game was the third time in the last 4 games the Cardinals offense has surpassed 200 rushing yards, in large part due to running back James Conner. Conner reached the 1,000 rushing yard milestone in Sunday's game for the first time in his career, despite missing 4 games this year due to injury. Incredibly impressive, not just by Conner's performance, also the offensive line, wide receivers, tight ends, everybody who played a role in blocking and creating those holes for Conner, who is a true bulldozer and refuses to go down. Post-game, Conner was saying how grateful he is for this team. Cardinals are grateful to have Conner. Head coach Jonathan Gannon said it best: Conner is a blueprint of what you want from a professional football player.
Can you imagine if he played every single game this year? what those stats might look like.
Outrageous.
Incredible. I mean, I think that even in these 13 games that he did play, he could put a case in for being a Pro Bowler. He didn't get it, but he has that case. And to have his first 1,000-yard season, knowing all the adversity he's gone through since college and then throughout the NFL, and to now really have a solidified home here in Arizona, right here in the Valley, he is. And Michael Wilson said, I know we keep going back to Michael Wilson, but he said that that's the blueprint, as Jonathan Gannon mentioned, of what you want to exemplify being a professional. That's who you want to look up to.
And he talked about it after the game. He looks up to Fred Taylor, who was able to extend his career. We all know that running backs, more and more through the years, it becomes a shortened career, sometimes due to injuries or just not being as effective. And James Conner is the guy to maybe fly in the face of that, guys. What is he, 28, 29?
Yeah, he's 20,
29 in May.
29 in May. And everyone's talked about it. His own coach, Jonathan Gannon, talked about this is the guy that can delay that because he takes good care of his body. I mean, just physically, we know what he's done. He overcame cancer. I mean, he's very in tune with his body. He doesn't take anything for granted. I think part of that does come from having to overcome a disease and then just being a football player. Look, they're all in tune with their bodies to an extent, but James Conner seems very committed to being able to make that happen each and every week, get out there. And I do believe he's a Pro Bowler. I don't care if he missed a few games. There's a lot of Pro Bowlers that missed some games this year. And unfortunately, he didn't get in there, but he definitely deserves it. Had another monster game yesterday, and I'm just excited. And again, credit to the previous regime for signing James Conner. Again, the fact that he's under contract next year, he's going to be a big part of this. His leadership to me is just as important as Kyler Murray's.
If I had a nickel for every defender James Conner bulldozed through, I would be able to get off the stage and retire.
You have a lot of nickels.
I would. It's very impressive the way he plays the game.
He's so dominant, but and we talk about it, just that the locker room component of it, that is so big, and that cannot be understated enough. And on the field, as James Conner goes, the offense goes as a whole. I mean, the running game, the cram and vertical identity is something that Jonathan Gannon mentioned in the beginning half of the season when we were at State Farm Stadium every single day for training camp. He said, that's going to be our identity. The offensive line questions, you weren't fully sure who's going to be your starting center. Yelda Froholt didn't have that job locked in
he had
until
four games as a starting center.
Exactly. Your left guard, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Elijah Wilkinson? Is it going to be Dennis Daly? Then you bring in Tristan Colon at the waiver wire. You had so many questions around the offensive line. How are you really going to have a cram and vertical identity? James Conner and that offensive line really put that all to rest.
The O-line was terrific this year. I mean, really. And for the most part, stayed healthy. I mean, there have been years through the years that, you lose multiple guys on the O-line. Yes, they had some injuries at left guard. Yes, DJ, is out now. But it just seemed like whoever they were able to plug in, and they did have to go to the waiver wire. They did have to, improvise a little bit. But, Froholt really, to me, is a guy that you point to. And Paris Johnson Jr., I believe, at least as of 2 weeks ago, didn't miss a snap. I don't think that changed.
He hasn't missed a snap all year.
That's really impressive. I know Froholt, I don't know in detail. You guys might know more, and some of it a lot of times is under the surface and not reported. But, I know Froholt battled through some things. And, these guys are extremely tough. And when you can find that kind of toughness, look, they're going to rest, they're going to heal up. But that offensive line was really underrated going into the season. That's the understatement of the year.
I spoke to Yelda Froholt in the beginning, about a few weeks ago, going into the Pittsburgh game. And he's very vocal about mental health, something that as an offensive lineman, those are the biggest guys, those are the toughest guys. You don't always expect for them to be as in tune with themselves like that. But he said that it's important for him to speak up and to speak out, and that's why he was so willing to speak with the mental strength coach. And it was somebody from Denmark as well, so he had that native connection with them. But for a position like that, they're your biggest guys, your toughest guys, you're down in the trenches, you got to be physical with it. He proved that even the stuff that you can't see could be treated and could be helped. And got to give kudos to him, because that's something that, as we've progressed as a society, it's something more acceptable to talk about. So kudos to Yelda.
An impressive year by Conner and the offensive line. Cardinals defense did enough Sunday against the Seahawks. They held running back Kenneth Walker to just 78 rushing yards. And entering Sunday's game, wide receiver DK Metcalf, 80% of his catches resulted in a first down or touchdown. Against the Cardinals, one catch for 10 yards. You want to talk about injuries? Well, Sunday's game for the starting defensive line was a great look into it. All three starters, not a single one of them were here when the season started, Jody.
It's really unbelievable when you think about it. You had Naquan Jones, you had Phil Hoskins out there, you had
Roy Lopez.
I'm blanking on Roy Lopez, who was a great addition to this team. Kind of a cool story, too, having the local ties. So, the D-line was more banged up than any position. We sat here week 1 and just talking about what a shame that Carlos Watkins and LJ Collier, those guys weren't going to be able to be out there. And then the hits kept coming. I mean, Lecky Fotu was injured for a chunk of the season. Then Jonathan Ledbetter went down. I'm definitely missing a few. Kevin Strong Jr. Was not part of this final game for the Cardinals, even though he had a pretty good season. So we'll see what happens in the future there. But again, if that's just an area that, if they improve that line, I don't know if you want to take a percentage, right? 20, 30, 40%. It's going to make a huge difference for this team. But I will say, like Dani mentioned, they hung in there. They really hung in there. They tried to do their job. They weren't trying to do more than that. And credit to the coaches for coaching up these guys.
The defensive line had a lot of good role players. There weren't as many big-time names on that defensive line that are going to be able to impact the quarterback. But they held their own, especially going against some of these offenses. When you go against the San Francisco and the Los Angeles Rams offense, two very fast-moving, high-dynamic offenses, especially with those O-lines, it's not easy. And somebody else, Dante Stills.
And it wasn't pretty at times.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty. Oh, I didn't mention Dante Stills. Yeah,
Dante Stills, being the rookie, coming in as a 6th-round pick, not even sure if you're going to be able to make the roster. And to come in and put up the type of numbers in the way that he did was truly remarkable. And it's a shame that Dante wasn't able to play in that last game, got placed on IR to a knee injury, I believe. So unfortunately that's how it ended for him. But to start the season, he didn't play week 1. He started week 2. He was a healthy scratch week 1. For him to come into that defensive line and truly make a name for himself as a 6th-round rookie, it's kind of impressive.
Impressive, not just by Stills. This entire rookie class, the way that the Cardinals had to rely on them through adversity, very impressive for that rookie class this year. Let's pull out the whiteboards for our players of the game.
All right.
Last one of the season.
Yeah, sad.
Still
my last drawing of the season, which is not sad. Very glad about that.
I'm now even more sad.
I love how we've had a lot of options, though, even in some of these defeats. It's been close. There's been a lot of guys that have had really good games. Could have easily been a win.
Jody, who is your player of the game?
Kind of talked about him already. I'm going with Michael Wilson. Again, this was pretty much a breakout game for him, yardage-wise, 6 for 95 yards, and certainly the first time he and Kyler Murray have really had a rhythm going. And the other thing that I really loved about what we saw with Michael Wilson was, you saw how he can break tackles. We talked about Trey McBride a lot, and he's a big tight end, and you see how strong he is, and he doesn't go down easily. That's a trait that Michael Wilson, I think, can really feed off of if he can prove it. And this has been a couple of weeks of trying to prove himself coming off the injury. I think we saw some good early from Michael Wilson. We definitely saw some good late in these last couple of games. A big part of that win against the Eagles with the 2-point conversion and the touchdown catch. And easily, again, we kind of keep going back to could have been a win to end the season. It wasn't just a 1-point loss, but Michael Wilson was a big part of that, being the leading receiver.
Zach?
So I went with the guy who has to be slinging him the pill, and it's going to be Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, we've talked extensively already about K1, so it's not really needed to get too much into it. The 22 for 30 for 262 yards, really solid performance from K1. But one of my favorite moments, I think, was when that late hit happened. To see Kyler Murray pop up in the way that he did, I think that there was an audible gasp around the stadium. But for him to pop up,
I wasn't happy with that moment.
He wasn't. But for him to step out for the one play that he was required to step out for, and to jog right back out and to get the applause that I believe he deserved to do that. Kyler Murray has done a great job coming into this offense. He hasn't skipped a beat. The offense wasn't doing the best when it was with Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune. Obviously, you're still learning a Drew Petzing offense, but Kyler Murray, I think, has shown why he's not just the player of the game, but why he's truly a foundation for this team.
I stuck with offense. I didn't even write a name. This is a crown.
Who could that be?
I know
Every week, my player of the game is King James Conner. Just an incredible piece for this offense, for this team. Conner hitting that incredible 1,000-yard milestone. He finished the game with more than 200 all-purpose yards, a career best 150 rushing yards. Not only is Conner a staple in the run game, the way he is as a receiver and how reliable he is there makes him a piece that this organization should use moving forward. forward when you're trying to build around your key players. To me, one of those key players is James Conner. Incredibly impressive.
The type of, we keep going back to it, the blueprint of what you want a player to be. And I think you could see how grateful he was post-game once he did hit that 1,000-yard mark. We spoke to him after San Francisco, and they had over 200 yards rushing, 234. He wasn't happy with it, because it didn't result into a win. And he wasn't happy with the loss yesterday either. But I think it's one of those games where you could allow yourself to self-reflect and take in the accomplishment, something he has not been able to achieve in his career. So congrats to the King.
By the way, best drawing of the year, I think.
Thank you.
I mean, you got to take up the whole board.
The bar is low. The bar is low.
Whole
Excellent.
thing.
I can't wait for next year for Dani's drawings to take that next step.
Thank you. I've got a whole off season.
It'd be just in the back, just like drawing.
The Cardinals' 4-win season this year feels absolutely nothing like last year's 4-win season. This organization is trending upwards with a true team-first mentality. Post-game, head coach Jonathan Gannon said he has never been more enthused for an offseason in his career, knowing how competitive and smart his team can be. Jody, what good are you taking away from this season?
Well, there was a lot of telling statements after the game. I mean, you mentioned Gannon already thinking about next year. I mean, let's face it, 4-13 and a long season in the NFL, it's tiring. It's hard. It's difficult. The hours are long and it's a grind. And yet these guys had a smile on their face. And Kyler Murray saying that he has been refreshed, that was awesome to hear because that's what you see with him. The other thing that stood out was Jonathan Gannon talking about Kyler's intangibles. And guys, we're a couple of years removed from, you would not have thought of that as one of the, we talked a lot about Kyler when he was drafted about, the skills, the running, the great arm, the ability, he was a winner. He's always been a winner wherever he's gone. And for Jonathan Gannon to talk about how his intangibles are why he's excited, that tells you a lot about the evolution of Kyler Murray. And so I was really listening to some of those words post-game, and again, for a 4-13 team, it is also, as Jonathan Gannon said, it's rare to feel this way. Now, believe me, they'll need their break, they'll need their rest, as will all of you, because, again, it is a long football season. But I think everyone feels a little bit energized already for next year.
It is telling when your franchise quarterback is saying it's refreshing going into the offseason with hope, with trust from the coaching staff, from the front office, and that the higher-ups, Zach, are forcing accountability. That says a lot from your quarterback.
Exactly, because it's no longer just your star players holding the other players accountable. It's everybody. It's all 53 in that locker room holding each other accountable, knowing what this team could be. And a 4-win season clearly isn't what you shoot for. It's not what you strive for. You strive to win Super Bowls and win divisional championships. That might not have been I don't want to say the intention going into the season, because that's what everybody intends to do once you play in the NFL. But this team is not, they're satisfied with how they've progressed as the season has gone on because of the optimism and hope. For Kyler Murray to say that this is one of his favorite teams that he's been a part of, and for so many other players in that locker room to say, yeah, we agree with him, truly shows that a culture shift, it is a complete 180. It's not just that's not just that shift, it's that shock, as DJ said during training camp. And you've seen it on display, and in so many cases, people talk about it. But to actually see it, because you see it in the fight. When you're down, and when you're down to Chicago, down 21 points, when you're down 21-6 in Philadelphia, when you're down 21 points, when you're down by 21, I believe it was 21-3, 21-6 here as well against the Seahawks. When you have that, it's very easy to lay down and to give up. But the fight that this team has truly shows that the accountability does start up top, but it also extends throughout the entire locker room.
And I think handling adversity is something too that, you saw this coach. It has to be the coaching staff leading with that. And they did it very well. I mean, if there was any kind of discord going on, you never saw it. And I think it was because it must have been nipped in the bud. You know what I mean? I mean, there were situations and there were players that were released and maybe that weren't fitting in and that weren't keeping that in a positive light. Everything that was going on behind the scenes. When you're losing, you can still have a positive culture. You can still have a good culture. And that's what we learned about this team this year.
One thing also, job security is a very big component in the NFL. I mean, Marco Wilson was released. And Marco Wilson, up until midway through the season, played every single snap as your starting cornerback. When you don't match the type of philosophy that they want to have in this locker room, if you don't, then there's not going to be a place. And I think that that's something that has really stood out, because you can't, now it's just a matter of finding the guys that fit the mold but also have the talent to win you some NFL football games.
No question, Kyler fits the mold and is the quarterback for the future for this organization. The intangibles you were talking about, Jody, the leadership was on display this year. Incredibly impressive for Murray to come off that ACL injury, play 8 games in a new offense with a new offensive coordinator, new players on this team, and create the type of chemistry and the type of culture out on the field that he did in such a short amount of time. Kyler was changing his footwork. He was learning the new ways to communicate with this offense, and did so in a way where he was calm and collected on the field, on the sideline, leading his team to success. Very impressive what Kyler Murray was able to do with half a season this year. Jody, when you're looking into the offseason, what parts of this offense does this organization still need to add star power or depth?
Well, I look at wide receiver. I think it's still an issue to have more depth there, to have more, options there for sure, and kind of a go-to guy for Kyler, who that will be, and you need more than one, but for me, with an elite quarterback, there's usually one guy who is always there on those gotta-have-it plays. And Trey McBride is evolving as a serious weapon. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. So there are options, no question. And James Conner, which is one thing you love about James, is that he's not just a running back. He's a pretty complete back. He can catch the ball one-handed a couple of times we saw this season. Offensively, I think they'll also, of course, you have to have depth on that offensive line, with DJ Humphries being out for, a pretty big chunk, I would imagine, of the season. Hopefully he's able to return somewhere near the end of the season, but you're going to need to figure out the plan there, whether it's moving Paris over and getting a right tackle, or whether it's getting someone else at left tackle that can do that job. We'll see what happens there. I think, the tight end was such a productive position overall this year. I think maybe it's just plug and play on that, or try to re-up those guys in the tight end room. Offensively, I think they're in a good spot. I think defense is where the major overhaul has to come. So the offense has some pretty big weapons already.
When it comes to wide receivers, the decisions start with Hollywood Brown, who's in a contract year, Zach, and whether or not the Cardinals want to re-sign Brown, who was dealing with a heel injury, which ended up ending his season early, being placed on IR.
Kyler said he would love to have Hollywood back. Hollywood said he's had good conversations with JG and Monty. And that's not to indicate that things don't change over time. When you're talking finances, a lot of different things change. And Hollywood Brown, knowing that he's in a contract year, Drew Terrell mentioned that he knew he's in a contract year, and he wanted to put up the type of numbers, as you see on the screen there, the 51 receptions for the 574 yards, the 4 touchdowns all at home as well. While those are not the numbers that Hollywood Brown would hope he has, he obviously wants that yardage mark to go more touchdowns, more times in the end zone. But it's the stuff that just creating play extension, opening up the offense as well. He is a threat on that outside, but you also do need a little bit to go into what you might look for. You need a bigger wide receiver. Michael Wilson being above 6 foot and Zach Pascal being above 6 foot. Those are the only 2 wide receivers that truly have size. You need to have somebody that's able to go up and make a play. Trey McBride's able to do that, but defenses rather are starting to learn how to game plan against a guy like Trey McBride.
I wanted to mention on Hollywood, though, and I think it boils down to, is it going to work out financially, right? Because that's where it always stands with free agents. But the interesting thing, and I'll say this, watching the quarterback play throughout the NFL, and I've talked about this a lot this year, of course, we all wish you wish it was better overall, whether it was the injuries or just the lack of playmakers. Think about, if you're Hollywood Brown, you also have to go with a place where the quarterback's going to be productive. Mm-hmm. And it helps that you know him. He's a really good friend. And the head coach, the culture, and all of that. So I think there's a lot to survey there. And I think this also speaks to, and why I bring it up, is any free agent, even ones that maybe don't know Kyler or JG and Monty. It's just, when you're looking around the league right now, there's some dysfunction in a lot of places. There's a lack of a quarterback in a lot of places. This is, to me, a pretty attractive place to be for any free agent. In my mind.
When it comes to the offensive line, questions at left guard, where the Cardinals had 4 different starters and had a revolving door throughout games trying to get looks at different players, and left tackle. Starter DJ Humphries tore his ACL, so he's expected to miss some time going into the 2024 season. Arizona has 3 options. Stay with Humphries as your starter, rely on a veteran like Kelvin Beachum, who stepped up until Humphries is able to come back. Address that area in free agency or draft. Or Rookie right tackle Paris Johnson Jr., who has experience playing on the left side, could possibly move to the left. When I got a chance to ask Johnson that in the locker room, he said, I'm going to go wherever the team needs me. However, this offseason, I am going to be practicing taking reps on both sides, left and right, just in case that's where my number's called.
And we've talked a little bit in the locker room, Paris and I, about how it's really just a matter of the footwork, and he's worked with DJ Humphries about being able to go from right side to left side of the line if needed. So to know that you have that opportunity, and he did play on the left side in college at left tackle. He also played a little bit of guard. Paris Johnson Jr. has just been a freak. The fact that he hasn't missed a single snap all season long truly just shows why he was worth that 6th overall pick. He's done a really solid job, and he's a part of that offensive line crew that got James Conner his 1,000 yards. So all-pro P, as Hollywood Brown tweeted out, Paris Johnson Jr. has done really solid. If you do move him over to the left side of the line, now you have to figure out who you're going to take on the right side of the line. Is that going to be a Kelvin Beachum, or are you going back into the draft and possibly bringing out an Olu Fashanu or a Joe Alt from Notre Dame? With that 4th overall pick, you do have a lot of different options. It does depend on what the teams above you end up doing. But I think that the Cardinals as a whole, that offensive line truly was kind of their secret strength throughout this year. Losing DJ is a big loss, but he's also somebody that who should be coming back later on next season.
And as good as Paris has been, he's still young. He's a rookie, so he learned a ton this year. He's got another year to get stronger even and, just become more of that veteran guy, which we know is so valuable on the offensive line. But yeah, overall, this team has 11 draft picks, 6 of which are in the top 3 rounds. So there's a lot that can be done. I know we're already it's months away, but we have all this time to speculate and talk about it and size up all the prospects. But a lot of maneuvering that can be done and targeting those areas of need. And it might not be need as far as I think at wide receiver, everyone's looking for a little bit of a superstar to come in, whether it's free agent or maybe a Marvin Harrison Jr. if that plays out at 4. But there's so many other positions that are important, including backups.
Options for the Cardinals, which means decisions to be made by the Cardinals. Zach, defensively, which positions are the most pressing to address?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's an area that Jonathan Gannon is a defensive-minded head coach. Nick Rallis has done a really solid job putting out a good game plan for the players that you do have. But whether it's the edge rusher on that or on that defensive line, you need somebody that's going to be able to get to the quarterback. Obviously, you have your guys in the secondary, and Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, both have been playing really solid throughout the season. Your cornerbacks, that's an area that you're also going to need to address in the draft. You had a really solid pickup in Keitrell Clark, somebody that played a lot of snaps at the waiver wire. Starling Thomas, you mentioned DK Metcalf stats. A large part of that is because Starling Thomas, an undrafted rookie out of UAB, was lining up against DK Metcalf, and he shut him down in this game. DK truly was not an impact player at all. So there's a lot of different areas. I think at linebacker you're okay, but that edge rusher, you have to try to find somebody that's going to be able to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to the D-line in general, and, you'd love to have a big body kind of plugging up the middle like we've seen here in the past with Calais Campbell and Darnell Dockett. Could go on and on about a few guys that were able to do that. But I agree, you got to get to the quarterback. You have to really address, to me, both the interior and the exterior sides of the defensive line. And I mean, there's a ton of guys in the draft, whether they can come in and make an immediate impression. I'm sure they also have a list of free agents that they would like to bring in. And again, they have the cap space, they have draft picks, so it's going to be interesting to see. You've got some intriguing guys in the draft, like a Jared Verse from Florida State. No idea if he'll, where that'll pan out in the draft, but he's a guy I really like. There's a number of them, and we saw them on display during the college football playoff, and then of course the big game coming up with and we're going to see more tonight with Michigan and why am I blanking on the other team? Washington, yes. Of course, I picked Washington. Why wouldn't I?
Budda Baker's going back.
The question with building your defensive line in the future is, do the Cardinals have the pieces they need moving forward? They were just unavailable this year due to injury. LJ Collier, Carlos Watkins, Jonathan Ledbetter got injured late in the season, tore his ACL. Leki Fotu missed time on IR with a hand injury. Is that an area where if those key players are healthy, that is enough, and then you can really look at building around your cornerbacks and your pass rush?
Of course. And I'm looking here. I mean, Carlos Watkins, in his one game that he played, he did have a sack. I mean, the fact that you have pieces there, and I think that's obviously at the end of it, we're going to look at the stats and we're going to say that defensive line room really took a hit. Coach Derek LeBlanc did not really have as many players to consistently coach because so many players were coming in and out of that room. It's not as much of an emphasis because you possibly do have the players in that locker room, but I think it's that pass rush as a whole. I'm looking at the stats here. Dennis Gardeck with 6 sacks, B.J. Ojolari with 4, Victor DiMakeji with 4, Zaven Collins with 3.5, and then you have Dante Stills with 3.5, and the rest are mostly defensive linemen. You have players that were able to get back there. It's a matter of putting them in the position. You can't just have one side of the line that's accounted for and the other side not. You have to have them both coming from both sides, and that defensive line, whether it be that nose tackle that's able to get beyond the center into the backfield.
This defense is missing a true star defender in which opposing offenses, Jody, are going to have to account for.
Yeah, and I agree that I think those guys are nice role players, rotational players, but I think, it would be nice to add a guy that has done it in the league, a star player. We'll see what happens if they are able to do that in free agency. Of course, last year you did have, even though he was banged up, you had J.J. Watt, you had Zach Allen in the middle who was becoming kind of a guy that was, his name was pretty well known throughout the league. I think, though, the entire defense, think of Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rollis coming over from Philly where they had 70 sacks last year. Part of that is just the functionality of the whole defense. You have to improve the back end. The back end, they had, as you mentioned, Marco was out. Starling Thomas was picked up and thrown in there. I mean, it's been, Antonio Hamilton was kind of a staple back there and did some good things. Jalen and Buddha, what you have there. But you have to strengthen the back end as well to be able to have that pass rush and have it all be. It's going to be a lot easier for Nick Rollis to dial up and scheme it up to get a pass rush going. We saw it even yesterday a few times, like guys not getting home. We saw it on the play when Sachere almost got to Geno Smith, and then Gardeck was kind of lost in coverage, and I think Gardeck might have thought that Sachere was going to have Geno Smith on the ground.
And Collins, too, just slipped, but would have had a sack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a lot of not quite getting home, and that's the biggest difference. If they can find guys that can get home more consistently, that's going to help this defense big time.
Defense as a whole, area of emphasis for this offseason.
Let's sum that up pretty well, right?
Let's pull out the whiteboards for the final time this season on Morning Scramble for Songbirds.
Do you get to draw? You draw again?
No, you guys are done with my drawings. This Songbirds, though, is not going to be just about the season finale against the Seahawks. A song that encompasses how you feel about the entire season. Jody, you look finished. You can go first.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night, and the song that just came to my mind was "Let's Get It Started" by the Black Eyed Peas. I think that's who sings that song, right? It's kind of a fun party song, and we're in a little bit of a party mood, are we not?
We
Thinking
are.
About how exciting next year is going to be. I think we all think, we're talking about maybe 8-9 wins, maybe a playoff situation. Let's get it started is how we feel about the 2024 season.
I love the optimism.
I do. I feel pretty optimistic about it, and that's a great feeling. One thing that teams in the NFL right now are going into off seasons of, there's a lot of teams that were like the Cardinals last year, uncertainty. Not sure, and they're not going to know about guys that have come in and they have to change their decision makers. They won't really know until the heart of the 2024 season. Well, the Cardinals have gotten through that part. And, really unanimously, it's been all positives and all rave reviews for what Monty Austinfort, Jonathan Gannon, and their staffs have done. So that part is over. So now it's exciting to think about, so Let's Get It Started was on my mind. And I like the song. So, Zach, how about you?
So I really am showing my youth in this one, because I'm picking a song from Nickelodeon. I went with Halfway There by Big Time Rush.
I can't tell you a single lyric by whatever that song is.
Oh, I could belt it out right now.
Are you offering?
No, I'm not offering. But the reason why I picked Halfway There is because I think that we've talked a lot about the pieces that this team has and what they need to bring in. We just had a little conversation about that there. I think that the biggest component, and something Kyler spoke about, was the refreshing aspect of it, the accountability aspect of it. Those are the intangibles that you need to make a solid football team. The development on the field will be there, but it's what you're also able to do off the field. And I think the fact that this is what it's been like off the field, the complete 180, the culture shock, truly shows why they are halfway there into making this season happen for next year, what it could potentially be like, because the good things are on the horizon, as Jonathan Gannon said post-game.
Last January, General Manager Monty Austinfort was hired, had his introductory press conference, then a few weeks later, Introducing head coach Jonathan Gannon, they talked about creating a winning culture. It's impressive how in just one season, that winning culture is tangible. You can feel it in the locker room. You can feel it around the facility. You can feel it when you're hearing franchise quarterback talk about how refreshing it is having that trust in the front office when it comes to addressing needs in the draft and in free agency. I went with Thanks for the Memories by Fall Out Boy. Just a really good season
one,
in the sense that, again, you are getting a good look at what this team can be, what this coaching staff can get out of rookies and depth players that don't have a lot of experience. It's been impressive on that front. The Cardinals have the 4th overall pick in the draft. Lots of decisions to be made there, and we will have coverage on azcardinals.com as well as our personal handles for draft coverage, Senior Bowl, Combine, free agency, all that good stuff, all out. There is no off season, right?
It begins right now.
It's really not.
There is no off season. So we'll have you covered, Bird Gang. So be sure to stay locked in on azcardinals.com and with us on our social channels. For Jody Jackson and Zach Gershman, Jacob Ortiz, our lovely producer, Jim Mohandro, who's over there running audio. Thank you so much. We have Matt Venezia running our cameras back there. It is a full team effort. So thank you to everybody who was involved in Morning Scramble and for those of you watching. For Jody Jackson and Zach Gershman, I'm Dani Sureck. Thanks so much for tuning in all year long here on Morning Scramble. We'll catch y'all right here next season.